Hi there, my name's Tim Cannon, and I am from a collective of designers and engineers called Grindhouse Wetwares, and we are transhumanists trying to build transhumanist devices and products, such as implants. And I wanted to take a moment to respond to your video, which I gotta admit was extremely amusing. I not only have I not heard quite such a well-worded argument for against transhumanism, I gotta say the format was hilarious. It used one of my favorite shows, Futurama, so I was very excited to actually get to respond to this. Futurama is a very interesting thought experiment. It really does say, what if you took present-day man with his insecurities and his discomforts and his agitations and his jealousies and his envies, and you gave him really high-tech space lasers and spaceships, and they could get to the moon within a second, and it was completely mundane to them. And what if the novelty of the fascinating was completely mundane to them, and it shows that the typical human miseries and sufferings kind of manage to outlast that sort of thing. And I agree with that. If we don't seek to change the mind and the experience that we're having, then we're just going to be monkeys with laser guns. Apes. And that scenario will play out in a number of ridiculous ways, just in the same way that it plays out in a number of ridiculous ways now, where you have monkeys competing over scraps of clothing and practically clawing each other's eyes out to get the new shoes and whatever. I mean, obviously when you give sufficiently unrefined brain a whole bunch of really refined technology and then watch it behave in groups, you see a whole bunch of really comical stuff ensue. However, one of the things he did mention was substrates of suffering. This guy mentions the substrates of suffering. Well, in terms of a substrate of suffering, I consider that to be the human brain. The human brain has structures in it that will cause it to suffer unnecessarily, or think that its suffering is greater than that of another human, despite the obvious shift in their circumstances. And so it does seem odd that, especially to transhumanists, that somebody in the first world can literally be as unhappy as somebody in the third world, and that their happiness is on a sliding scale, and that maybe they can't appreciate the ramifications of that. However, I think that when you look at the things that transhumanists want to fix, on the whole, you're talking about a repair of some of the more animalistic behaviors. And some of those animalistic behaviors are what cause the hedonic treadmill, the things that always make us happy because we're always uncomfortably seeking more. It's not like your dog is ever happy with the amount of food that it's received. If you put a dog in a room full of food, it will just continue to eat and eat and eat. Its animal brain is just wired to never be satisfied with the amount of food that it has. However, you could fix that in a dog, and then it might be eventually happy with the amount of food it receives. However, it might not be then happy with the amount of sex it's receiving. And so there are areas which cause contention where we want people to become satisfied with their amount, with what they have, and then there are other areas where we never want people to be satisfied, and we always want the hedonic treadmill to be working so that we're moving forward. For example, in things like our sense of curiosity, which tends to never be able to be sated, and the ability to uncover, receive a gratifying reward from scientific discovery and scientific inquiry and finding out those sorts of things. But technology won't change the amount of happiness in your society unless that's exactly what you're trying to do with it. If you're not trying to solve certain economic problems and things of that nature, then you tend not to be focused on happiness. In Futurama as well, you mentioned that they have a remedy for suffering, but it doesn't appear that they have a remedy for suffering. Suffering seems to abound in that culture, and in fact, a really fun little feature of Futurama is that the robots have been given brains identical to the human animal.
All right, now let's mafia things up a bit.
And therefore get the bonus of suffering in this amazing time, even though they're more amazing than the humans that they live around. So it actually is funny because the human brain can actually export suffering to inanimate objects in the Futurama future, and I don't think that that's something that transhumanists would allow to cross over like that, and I think that that's something that we would be trying to curb in certain ways. But you do have to look at the way that neurochemistry works and the way that the brain works and figure out what parts of you need to be changed and what parts don't. I don't think that transhumanists are trying to fix unhappiness so much as unnecessary suffering, or in other words, to get to a place where all feasible suffering that might be based on chance in this world could be remedied, would be the actual, more appropriate way of stating the goal. There's always going to be unhappiness if people don't have things what they want, but how that unhappiness is expressed might not come out as what we naturally consider suffering at this day and age as well. So it may change the way in which we react to suffering, depression, misery, violence, these sorts of things, and convert that over to maybe effort, motivation, optimism, those sorts of things, which are very good for society and good for collaboration and good for moving things forward. Saying that we should be constantly enthralled with the unveiling of technology, I think that that's also maybe possibly not exactly an accurate way of understanding how the transhumanist future might look. We wouldn't be constantly enthralled with technology. At some point, we would definitely get used to the pace at which technology is changing, and in fact, you see that now. But again, how we react to that sort of thing, and how our human brains and how we react in large groups of people, which is more like a study in animal psychology than it is in human psychology, those things might need to change in order for it to not be as dystopian as you might see in Futurama. But again, in short, my final point is that Futurama, although it doesn't look like it solved suffering, it doesn't look bad either. It just looks like people are unappreciative of what they have. And I would agree with Louis C.K. that currently people are extremely unappreciative of what they have. And that's something that we definitely need to solve, is people's ability to completely get over their circumstances and never see the true difference between their unhappiness for not having a big enough screen TV and some African child's unhappiness about not having food today. That is obviously something that needs changed about the human brain so that we can quantify suffering to some degree and then figure out how to remove the most of it with the highest priority. So I just wanted to kind of respond. However, I do want to say I definitely got it, and it's not like I can't take a joke, because Futurama is an amazing show, and I definitely get the argument. But I did want to respond with maybe something as evenly well-rounded and well thought out to kind of counter what you were saying. So I appreciate you taking the time to profile transhumanity, and I really enjoyed your argument. I thought it was extremely well thought out, so I appreciate it. Thanks.